Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to have such a good audience today, both here and online. My name is Gonzalo Mota. I'm the Consul General of Portugal in Zurich. Together with the University of Zurich, we decided to host this conference here because we felt the need to bring some of the newest Portuguese architecture to this wonderful city, and also to try to stimulate a little bit more the relationship between the two architectural communities. I think, as we may know, there are a lot of Portuguese architects working here in this city, and also some Portuguese youngsters studying architecture here in this faculty. So I can see a lot of wonderful faces and young faces here. So I'm very happy to start this conference. Without further ado, I will give the floor to my ambassador. Next, it will be Professor Philip Oosprong to give also his opening address, and Tom Emerson as well. So my dear ambassador, I'll give you the floor. Thank you very much.
Also, and around 40,000 binationals, so holding the Portuguese and Swiss nationality. But also for our unique geographical beauties and the generous way we welcome all who visit us is perhaps less well perceived when it comes to innovation and the quality of products created or service provided in multiple areas of the economic activity. Portugal, a European nation with almost 900 years of history and a global vocation, halfway between the Asian and American continents, is a safe destination for investment and distinguished partner for creating or expanding businesses. A member of multiple international organizations, it joined the European Union in 1986, and its society, economy, and business environment, centered in small and medium-sized enterprises, has evolved progressively. Today, it is a hub of talent and innovation, focusing in its growth options on green economic solutions with a low ecological footprint, or strong digitalization of the state administration and the promotion of a more simplified relationship between companies and citizens, of inventions and patents also of national origin, or of low risk for investors, and of very positive recent results in terms of the international macroeconomy. This conference, in what concerns architecture, will certainly make possible to better understand where we are and where we want to go, thereby rebuilding the image of a Portugal that is clearly different from the one that 50 years ago embraced freedom and democracy, as has been so eloquently celebrated in recent days, both in Portugal and various parts of the world, including Switzerland. So thank you very much. Hope that you will enjoy the session that Gonzalo was prepared. And of course, thank you very much for all of those that came to Portugal and all of those that online are accompanying us today. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Philip Oosprong, professor for the history of art and architecture and head of the Institute for the History and Theory of Architecture. I'm very pleased to welcome Your Excellency, Ambassador of Portugal to Switzerland, Julio Vilela, dear Consul General of Portugal in Zurich, Gonzalo Mota, dear Vice Dean of the University of Porto, Teresa, dear colleagues, students, and guests. It's my pleasure and an honor to welcome Fala, Felipe Megalás, Ana Luis Soares, Ahmed, Bekodia, and Lara, thanks so much for coming from Lausanne and Porto to us. We're very pleased to have you. Welcome to ETH. Welcome back to ETH. When in the realm of architecture, we hear the name Porto, we think before thinking of the famous wine of the School of Architecture. We think of names such as Fernando Távora, Álvaro Siza Vieira, Eduardo Souto de Moura. We think of the incredible beauty of the campus overlooking the river with its 4 heads, one for each year of the architecture curriculum, the courtyard at the library designed by Siza. We think of dear colleagues who spend time here at ETH as visiting professors such as Souto de Moura, as postdocs such as André Tavares, as doc students such as Luis Ribeiro de Silva or Manuel Montenegro, as students such as Ahmed. And Porto is just one of several excellent schools in Portugal and part of the driving forces of contemporary architecture development, roughly since half a century. So it coincides, of course, with the time of the Carnage Revolution, whose 50th birthday we're happy to co-celebrate with you. It's also nice to be, I think, the first time that I'm standing next to flags in this room. I recognize the Swiss flag, of course, and I'm happy to see the Portuguese flag. And I'm also happy that's a European flag in this room. Could we keep that? So it was with gratitude and pleasure that we could respond to this kind offer initiative brought to us by the Consul General to host this event. We agreed that we would focus on one position as an entry point to the richness of architecture in Portugal, and we are honored and pleased that Fala accepted a collective practice that since a decade has brought new air into our discipline. It's not always easy to stand on the shoulders of giants. We know this in Switzerland. In Swiss architecture, we're well aware of this. Perhaps multiple authorships and a wide spectrum of methods and perspectives is the best way to both respect the legacy and move forward. And so in my view, you stand exactly for this alternative method. I could not really define what your main method is, if it's architecture, urbanism, if it's scenography, if it's theory, but it's probably many of those combined. And this is also what I find intriguing, how you move freely through scales and disciplines in a context where the construction industry tends to homogenize architectural diversity by means of standardization and monopolization. This is a precious practice also for the autonomy of our discipline. So we're glad to have you here, also standing for a younger generation who demonstrate ways how architecture, not only in Portugal, but also elsewhere, can move ahead. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Tom Emerson, who will then hand over to you.
Thank you. And my turn to welcome you all. Welcome, Atelier Fala. Just before the introduction, when you're done with the European flag, could I take it home? just saying. Oh, it breaks my heart. I would just like to, I'm representing the IEA, the Institute for Architecture and Design. And with that in mind, I won't go through a long introduction, except that I would like to just bring forward just a couple of notions about Fala. They were founded in 2013 in Tokyo in a capsule hotel, writing text about metabolists. That is something I think is correct. But then that's about the only thing that I believe that I found out which is correct, because according to them, they are a naive architectural practice. I haven't been fortunate enough to see any of their buildings in the flesh, but again, according to them, it doesn't really matter because the building is just a necessary one-to-one model to be photographed. Their words. they say that they are very bad at sketching, which, as far as I know, is blasphemous for an architect in Porto. And they also say that constructive truth is nothing to be celebrated, which is fighting talk in Switzerland. So all of these statements, I think, first of all, are untrue. I do not believe them looking at their work. And I think it's simply a kind of provocation or a kind of diversion, a way to slip some other truths through into the space which Philip has described, which is really kind of occupies so much of our imagination about Portuguese architecture. So I think that they kind of have all sorts of sly methods to bring in a kind of new transformative spirit, which is about kind of lightness, which is about playfulness, which is witty, and is kind of shifting the goalposts, I think, towards a new space, one which I think we can see fragments of in publications, fragments of online, in the books you produce, but actually what we'd really like to hear and see is how you put it all back together. So over to you. Thank you very much.
I have a special one. Here. Thank you. So after all these presentations, a lot of pressure to talk about our work. Of course, first of all, we really thank everyone that was involved in the organization of this event, the fact that we were brought here to talk about our work and to present what the new Portuguese architecture is. I'm not sure if we are the representatives of the new architecture. We are Portuguese, but maybe we are not Portuguese, because actually half of us are Portuguese, half of us are not. We are based in Portugal, that's true, but now actually it's not, because also one of our partners is now back in Switzerland. When families happen, things change, of course. We are a collective, but maybe it's not a collective. We are 4 partners, but we have 4 or 5 collaborators that have stayed with us for a very long time, some of them, some shorter periods. Some of our older collaborators are also here in the room, so I'm quite happy to see their faces. So they left Portugal and they came to Switzerland. Of course, there's better, not better, different conditions in in Switzerland than in Portugal. But our office, even though, okay, maybe it was founded in 2013, but okay, it was when we decided the name, it was when we opened the website. So it's also not very consistent, or it's a bit blurry when or how old Fala is, let's say. So we officially said last year we are 10 years old. So are we new if we are already an office of 10 years? So it's always in between where we are and where we came from. And today we are actually going to talk about where we want to go after. Because when we talk about Portugal, again, there's all these masters that were referred that are quite heavy for us in terms of background from Portugal. But every time we go abroad and we present our work, everyone says, yes, you look so Portuguese. Your work really feels Portuguese. In Portugal, everyone says, like, you're not Portuguese at all. You're not doing anything correct. Not correct, but like, you're not following how things should be done. So we are in this context that is not super clean, super clear. We don't work really in the city centers. We work in this kind of suburbs, neighborhoods that we don't really know also where architecture is, or actually we see a lot of architecture, we see a lot of construction, but maybe not the so-called high architecture. So we are in this limbo, and we are okay with it. We thrive in this chaos, let's say. And it's in this chaos that we actually managed to build a lot of projects. So more or less 50 projects in the past 10 years, 11 years, from very small projects to very big projects, almost all in Portugal. That's true. Only a few temporary projects were done abroad. So for sure, our construction is done in Portugal, but we try to expand, and we try to expand our minds regarding our work and where we want to aim forward. But as of today, there has been a period where we would call ourselves naive. Maybe now maybe in a more cynical way. Now, today we are going to talk about 4 topics. That are not the only topics, of course, that we are interested in, but 4 topics that are that bring most of our concerns as of today. So I will start with economy. It might not be visible from the projects that we do, but our economy or the economy in Portugal and the kind of clients we get are always based in economy of means and short budgets for a lot of square meters and trying to do whatever we can with those budgets. But it's also a matter of using this economy to bring the biggest and the richest spatial qualities as possible. So it's not that you need a lot of money to build architecture and to bring good spaces for people. And on this topic in particular, I'm going to show 2 projects with very different scales, but both based on less than 500 euros square meter transformations. So this project, it's actually a very big warehouse in the limits of the city of Porto. So in Campanha, it's an area that now it's starting to become very active. A lot of city hall projects are being developed there. When our client actually bought this there, it was very cheap because no one wanted to go into this area. It was mainly an industrial area, so there were a lot of abandoned warehouses. And we got this plot that was immense, huge, for a house for a couple, very simple, let's say, program. And this idea of a very big space for a living room or for housing, it's something that we have been developing in other projects. So we've transformed several ground floors into housing in terms of lack of, because of the lack of housing accessibility in Porto. And we always use this idea of composition to try to bring to these spaces qualities that as a base they wouldn't have. So in this one, you can see how big this plot is. There was a front building that used to be a factory to build weights for scales. And then it became a garage for a repair garage. So in the end, we had to transform this into a housing project. The only thing we did was we demolished a small part to bring natural light in the middle. And then we created 1 huge living room and 2 small private areas on the 2 extremes. And to solve this kind of big projects, we always go back to references. So of course we look into the Portuguese references. It's impossible not to look into where we come from, our teachers, but we also look outside, also by the fact that we always have foreign collaborators and foreign partners too. So how to populate this immense space, how to make it livable is something that, of course, we think, okay, we are inventing something, but it has been thought before, it has been explored. So with just a few objects, we manage to bring just hints of of living, hints of living, of housing, of home into this big warehouse. And of course, in the back, there's even the private area, but that has even a face or even a facade to these common rooms. And then we look into the other direction and we see this huge hangar, let's say, that is actually a very traditional space for of construction in Portugal. And actually the client in this case lived in London and actually wanted an industrial feeling of London that has brick and has metal structures, but the industrial buildings in Porto are made out of granite and are made out of these amazing wood structures that hold the beam. So on this big space, we kept the original structure. We just heated the bedrooms, let's say, and we use as much as we could the existing space, but then we added also this textile to bring back the warmth that maybe these industrial spaces wouldn't have. And then there's always these fictions, and we look back and thinking about what a house is, what defines a house. It's a door. What is a door? What is the entrance door? So there's these elements scattered around that bring us back to or that blur this idea of what a house can be, what a home can be, and actually the habitation is whatever the clients want. If they want to make this back a garage, it would also work, but it actually allows for this flexibility and this blurriness between its actual function. And then in these projects, besides this blurriness, there's also then the relation with the outside, the relation with the facades. Actually, with the demolitions and what we created, we ended up defining 4 different facades facing the outside. And each one of them is similar, but it's different. It has a few elements that bring them together, but then each one looks into a different direction and brings a different character into the space, from the interior of the courtyard, from the super busy street on the other side, or in the back where nothing is happening right now, but we are ready to receive whatever project may happen in this big landscape that used to be an electrical power location. Actually now, Sotomura, I think it's doing a project there. So we will be neighbors and we are ready to welcome, and someone will see us, even if for now only maybe from a photograph taken from very far away, we actually managed to see this facade. The second project is it's the opposite in terms of scale. It's a super tiny project in a very nearby location, but in the areas where you would have these big warehouses, you would also have the places where the people would live. So this is not exactly what we called ilhas, which is the back of plots where a lot of people would live in very tiny spaces, but it's still a very tiny space for a house. And you see all the different houses and then one of these big warehouses. And all these houses have a very strong character and everyone wants to be very proud of their own facade. So there's a lot of things happening. We decided to be quite shy and quite calm facing the street. And then because the space is so small, the space is actually just defined by 2 lines, a straight line and a curved line. And also this definition of a line, it's not just about the shape, but it also it's the most efficient way of solving a problem or this particular problem. But even in this particular way, there's many ways on how we can explore this topic. So again, we have 4 perpendicular lines to the street as we had in the previous project, and then just 2 lines, one inside, one outside, that helps defining the space itself. And there's a very specific character, which is you enter through the bedroom because there's the space that you can have, and then you go to the back to the living room. But in terms of volume, we actually did the opposite. So even though the house is very small, even though we have all these limitations of following the alignments of the neighbors, we had more volume than what we ended up using on the inside. But the volume itself, it gives a scale it gives a relation with a scale. And when you enter in a small space, tiny space, low space, and then you pass through a small door and you enter into the next room, and the next room has a moment that has a super tall or not a super tall, a taller ceiling height. Actually, this idea of the proportions of the space, and Cesar did this many times, much better than we did, of course. But this idea of compression and then extension, and the fact that there's no as a relation with the scale or with the body, we don't really understand how tall or not this space is, brings a generosity to the project that if we would have followed the exact shape of the exterior, that people could relate actually with the exterior and understand it better, wouldn't have the same effect that we wanted to create. So there's these two spaces just connected with a door, a small door that has one continuous line from the entrance door until the living room and until the garden. Then there's this very tall space that, because there's nothing happening there, there's no relation with scale, there's not a lamp up there that we can understand the scale. It helps make this space even more generous than it might feel, and then it fully opens to this tiny backyard, and there is like an oasis in the back, and also the materials and the reflections and the light, and because it's also facing south, bring back to the interior some of these colors and some of these reflections and some of this richness of elements that they can bring. And then on the opposite side, while in the front facade we were quite sober, in the back facade we decided to put all the intentions. Everything is happening in this back facade is the proudest moment of the house itself, but it's just for a private use. No one else can see this private inner space, and it gives this generosity, even though in terms of finishes, square meters, maybe it's quite small, but it tries to bring all this generosity into the space. And here you can see the courtyard that is almost as big as the house, and even though everything is very tiny in this area. And then I'll pass.
So I assume you can hear me. So as Anna said in the beginning, the four themes we decided to address, although they are very precise one, but I would say that they are also kind of an entry point into a series of projects, and there are also excuses, let's say, to talk about things that fascinate us. So elements. I would say that our practice engaged with elements from the very beginning of our career, when our kind of tools and spaces and projects and commissions were rather limited, and when we operated with white gypsum walls, coats of paint, but at the same time from that period, curved walls, celebrated pavements, blue doors, and painted ceilings kind of emerged as a certain intention, let's say, to fragment the project and to kind of to divide the surfaces, and with very simple means to celebrate separate parts of a space, of a building. At the same time, we let's say conceived complex figures out of rather banal building parts, and from that resulted a few pavilions. And elements, they still keep, let's say, they still keep fascinate us and interest us, and we are interested in exploring these qualities that they can bring, the way they can inhabit the space before the actual tenant move in, the way they bring, the way they question the rational, the way they bring the surreal, and all of those things. And the two projects I will present, they address the same theme, but in rather different ways. One project is about a system, so it's about a few elements that are repeated in a very kind of mathematical way. And then the second project is rather a hectic collection of fragments, but both are houses, and both kind of with this set of elements, both constitute some kind of difficult whole of the project. So the first one is called The House of Countless Windows. It is located in, I would say, in the residential area of Lisbon. The plot itself is quite peculiar. So it is facing the street on one side. There is this wild greenery at the back that actually kind of had to be tamed with this kind of platform garden. The plot is also rather different from what, for instance, Anna showed in previous projects. So it's not this typical very long, narrow slice of land, but in this case, the building was actually turned to the street with its long side, which I think for us was also a rather unusual condition. And finally, well, like every project, it had to follow some rules. It had to conform, and a few things that were imposed by the municipality were, of course, let's say the alignment of the neighbors, the amount of levels, but also the fact that the facade of the building had to have punched windows in order to kind of match the street and match its neighbors. So let's say with this. Kind of with these entry points to the project, and also with the program that was introduced by the client, and with this kind of very simple means, we decided to to take this project rather in the realm of the slightly surreal and almost nonsensical. So, for instance, the necessary punched window was repeated probably twice the amount it was needed. I don't remember, but at 58 windows in the two facades, so a lot of small windows. And what was funny is that, let's say, when you look at the facade, when you just glimpse at it, you don't even notice that something is off, but at the same time, you realize that it actually has much more windows than it needs, and then the scale of the building is off. And that happens because behind this facade with many small windows, we introduced a system of split levels, kind of in order to incorporate all the necessary spaces. So in a way, I think it recalls the 7.5 floor, if I'm not mistaken, from being John Malkovich. So the strange facade that is projected on the street is actually hiding this system of split levels that is then covered by the vault on top. Oh, this is very dark, I'm sorry. And because of the split level system, because of the repetition of the window, somehow the project took the turn to become kind of a very systematic building. So it is almost a mathematical equation or a theorem, because in that sense, it was really about matching all the thicknesses of all the slab, making sure that the windows align, making sure that the staircase and the steps work. And then it's also about translating all that logic into the plan. So the size of the window, the size of the marble tile, the size of the door, the glass brick, and so on and so forth. So in a way, the project is kind of informed by this set of, one could say, standard and catalog materials, but it is also about how we engaged with these materials and how we imposed on ourselves this system of rules in how to apply them. So at the very center of the building is the staircase that then takes you on both sides. And so if you cut the building in, let's say, two different places, the levels, they shift according to one another. So yeah, the staircase is at the center, and then the plan of the house is rather straightforward. I would say it's so the perimeter is kind of delineated with the window. You see again that there is kind of all the lines can be traced, all the levels they follow the same structure, and then it's really just a few kind of short transversal walls that are separating the bedrooms from the staircase, and that mark the bathrooms or storage spaces when it is necessary. So in a way, the kind of this short section becomes a defining drawing for this project. It has the kind of the levels that are shifting, and then it has the kind of the vault at the very top, which is actually there because the living room is put to the very top of the house. So the vault, in that sense, kind of covers and celebrates the most important and the kind of the public space of the house. Of course, the project at the time was also, let's say, both conscious and an unconscious connection to a series of references that we studied at the time. So you see the glass brick, you see the repetitive windows, you see the vault. So in that sense, it kind of all of these ideas were brought together in one project. And because of this idea of the mathematical equation and using the same window, the same materials, all the spaces of the house, all the rooms, they are kind of the same room. It's only the position of the window that is changing, or it's kind of the profile of the glass brick wall. So the house in that sense becomes let's say, a strange version of a living space. And then the materiality and the windows that are kind of at the level of your feet, they make the entire space kind of questionable and surreal. And it's also the fact that you can kind of see through all the walls, and if you turn on light in one end of the house, it will actually affect the space on the opposite side. And the staircase, of course, becomes kind of the main spatial event because it's the kind of it is the vertical journey through the volume. It was also funny to, let's say, find the exceptions within the system, like you see the small white door, which kind of follows all the doors, but at the same time it is cut at half the level. So the living room at the top is the main space that is covered by the vault. The kitchen hood becomes perhaps one of the main exceptional elements within the house, and it's kind of it takes place probably of a suspended column in this project. And again, the entire space, although let's say designed with a very rational rational intention on one side, it becomes quite quite blurry and quite surreal. So this kind of complex interior with the split level is then framed by the two facades, where the window, they almost because of its small size and because of the marble lintel, the window becomes a pattern. And so the kind of the complex figure of the house is both very rational and very questionable at the same time. And if we zoom out again and go back to the kind of to the image of the building from the street, what I also find funny is that when the lights are on and when when the night comes, the image that you get from the house is really this kind of bits and fragments of the domestic life. So you don't really see, let's say, a person standing in the window, but you see someone's leg. So it's it's a funny fragmentation of the interior of that space. So the second project is also a house, this time in Porto. It is called the house with an inverted roof. The house is located in the suburban area of Porto, and you can see that, let's say, the image of the neighborhood is quite monotonous. So almost every house has a pitched roof with the tiles on top. And in order to let's say, introduce this project, I think that this image does a very good job in showing how, let's say, a house that is a bit of an alien is landing in the neighborhood of seemingly traditional homes. And this is the image from Uehara House by Shinohara. And so through the kind of very simple operation of inversion of the sloped roof, the house assumes a shape that is rather, let's say, unconventional for the area. So the three levels of the living space are kind of sheltered by the roof that is half quarter of a circle and then half an oblique line. So let's say the profile of the building is rather bizarre, and it kind of recalls this geometrical exercise by Robert Mangold. It is also, again, I would say, a reflection on a few kind of references and personal obsession of ours, again coming from Japan. And let's say, so the entire building is defined by this outline of the roof. At the same time, the figure of the house is painted in white. So let's say it doesn't announce its presence too strongly. So it's kind of this abstract volume that appears through the small agricultural fields. And the facade of the house is almost like a blank canvas. And what I also find funny is that the windows, the openings, they actually can be can be closed and can be erased with the shutters. And the white figure is sitting on this plinth of the glass brick ground floor. So let's say kind of the building crawls into the neighborhood, and being this kind of an abstract white volume on the outside, on the interior, it actually is a rather kind of complex assemblage of elements. And so the house has 3 levels. And if we look at the plan of the house, let's say the first I would say the first thing that catches one attention is the fact that on one side of the house, the structure detaches itself from the perimeter wall, and then there is one column that is kind of not playing by the rules. And so these columns, they're concrete columns, they're painted in green, and they become kind of important actors within that interior. So the living room occupies the ground floor. It's connected to the garden and everything. Then it has the double height space that is punched by one of the exceptional columns, and it kind of provides the first connection to the upper level. Then the upper level becomes kind of this hectic collection of elements, but all of them, let's say, are taking part in accommodating all the programs, all the staircases, and all the kind of kinks and moments within the house. And again, I think it's interesting how in every space the structure appears, how it takes a different position in relation to the wall, to the opening. So this kind of, let's say, the internal journey through the house is punctuated by these green columns, and then the space under the quarter of the circle roof is actually the main bedroom of the house. But going back to the structure that detached itself while building the house, we knew it from the very beginning, but there is one column within the system that actually ended up on the terrace. So there was no need for that column to go all the way up. But as we, let's say, like our rules, and we like the consistency, and at the same time we like the kind of slightly nonsensical, we decided to build this column all the way up, and so it becomes this kind of mischievous element within this building. And this kind of column, I would say, falls into the long line of such elements that we are, let's say, experimenting or investigating in our practice. So one of them is the column that doesn't touch the ceiling in the House of Three Generations. The other is the suspended column of the suspended house that didn't actually make it to the very end of the project, but that kind of marked, I think, an important moment for our practice.
So I will continue with a third part that we called choreography. Under this term, let's say what interests us is the idea that the built world is made of movements that are on some level drawn at least. And of course, this is very tightly related to the elements that Lara was describing. And I will just showcase a few points about this within some projects. This is the transformation of a ground floor, let's say, ruin of an old workspace that we worked on, that we finished a few months ago. As Anna Luisa has described, this is a typology we've been playing with a few times, mostly because of the lack of affordability of housing, let's say, in recent times in Porto and Lisbon. So we have been facing clients that are, actually, the first time we did one of these was because some clients showed up with a garage they had bought and told us, basically, that's what we could bought within our budget. Can you make it a house? And in this case, this is in the center of Porto. It's in the ground floor of a gigantic, I mean, not gigantic, but super tall housing block. And it had this exterior space in the back. And of course, the difficulty is that when you, this is how we found it on the inside, the difficulty with such a situation is that, of course, you cannot fit in, let's say, a traditional typology of housing within, let's say, a space that is 25-meter deep, 5-meter wide. You cannot have the typical 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms that a normal apartment would have. So, of course, you have to rethink things and to imagine a domesticity that, let's say, evolves in a different manner in these spaces. So here we thought, okay, this is a space that is beautiful when it's one space. Cutting it to put a bedroom makes it much less attractive. So but at the same time, there was a need for a bedroom. So we thought maybe we can think of a space that is a bit ambiguous in the sense that it feels like one, but it is also divided on some level. I mean, you will see. And the different elements, let's say, play the role of trying, let's say, reinforcing that ambiguity. So you see, for example, here, this concrete element that is the structure of the building that is basically something as found, which is almost colliding with this glass brick wall that is, let's say, dividing the space, but still bringing light in. Then you have these doors that sometimes, this one, for instance, is a fridge for this kitchen. This one is storage. Some other are actually doors to the bathroom or storage spaces. So all of these elements basically also take some distance to the normal readability of a door or of, let's say, the normal texture of domestic life. And so to reinforce the idea that this is one space or two, basically the division that encloses the bedroom basically can totally disappear within the wall or appear within the space. And this painterly shape that, of course, to us relates to some painters that we admire, was actually inspired by the weird, this is actually yellow glass. So this, in the existing building, they had this motif, and we thought, okay, by using this for our doors, we actually make the building a bit part of the existing in a different manner. And on the back side, let's say, of course, here is very different, but by painting the facade in this manner, it tries to act like a plinth or a cornice for the whole building. And this is the garden, which is, I mean, still quite fresh, so it will grow a bit wilder. But here we thought, because there is no vis-a-vis, it's this quite claustrophobic garden in the middle of the city, we thought we would bring some eyes there that look at you so that you have some sort of vis-a-vis. And it works quite well, actually. And when these will be fully engulfed in jungle, it will feel like a gigantic beast in the back. Then another project in a slightly different condition. This is a small housing project, which is in a quite peculiar location. Maybe the next slide shows it better. This is in the back, you can see a project we built a couple of years before, which is essentially student housing around a new park or garden that is actually a public space technically. And another client, totally unrelated, really by it was really a coincidence, asked us to build a housing block there, which has to align with the neighbor here. But it meant basically that this building is in between two public spaces. There's the street on the one side, and there's the garden we had built 2 hours earlier on the other side. And so we thought, okay, this totally shifts the hierarchies of the facade. It means these two facades are equally important. Actually, in an early version of the project, we thought of having the main entrance door in the back, but this proved impossible. But in any case, what mattered to us is that the three facade, because there's a third one which could have been treated like this. This is how the side facades are treated normally in Porto, waiting for a neighbor. We thought actually we would treat the whole building as one thing. And so this is the side facade, like this. And here the strategy was, okay, with the normal, let's say, quite low building of these, quite low budget of these facades, we will just spread it on the whole. And so we use local marble elements. I mean, marble is quite cheap in Portugal compared to Switzerland at least. It's local stuff basically, but by using it in super thin elements like this, we can actually have a huge impact with it. So in the whole building, there is, I think, around 11 square meter of marble, which means that in the budget of such a project, it's really like absolutely residual, which of course in such a project was essential to convince the client. So this is how it looks like. I mean, this facade is actually the most visible because there's a crossing that looks towards it. This is the whole facades unrolled, so it becomes really one, like a wallpaper rotating around the building. And within it, there is this seemingly chaotic system of staircases, which I will try to explain. Basically, the client asked us for 4 apartments because there are 4 levels. We looked at the regulations and we understood that if we have really 4 apartments, 1 on each level, we need an elevator. If we have 3 apartments with the last one taking the last 2 levels, we can actually remove the elevator. So of course, the elevator is a huge cost considering the scale of the building. So that helped us in convincing him. And from that moment, maybe I will switch to the plans that's clearer. We understood that the most efficient staircase is actually not a staircase that rotates around itself, but actually this staircase that starts with a straight flight and then turns in the back. Here it gives access to the last apartment, and then the staircase that makes the duplex possible rotates around it. So it's extremely efficient in terms of volume. It seems frivolous or irrational, but it's actually, let's say, all these dimensions are really the minimum. For example, this is what allows to have the wheelchair 150 circle here. There's a tiny, let's say, chimney in the back here, which is actually necessary to bring air exhaustion to the staircase, which starts 1 level below the common one. So all of these things are at least on some level rational. This is the inside of that staircase space, the common space, which has a sort of a Piranesian quality. This is with a bit more finishes. And then we also decided, so that staircase unfolds along the facade that is towards the neighbor. And we also agglutinated all the other small rooms along that facade. So the bathrooms, for example, this is an entrance to a bathroom. But what interested us in developing this system is that also it means each of these apartment becomes very different. So here you can see, well, this is the middle one with its bathroom in the back. Above the staircase, it gains a sort of shelf. Here, this one has the staircase protruding inside of it. This is the 2 bedrooms of the duplex on the level below, and this is the last level with that window being in between 2 levels, which also, let's say, brings a bit funny proportions to the facade. So this is the lowest apartment, which was not in the previous slide, which here you can see gained some space under the staircase, etc. And here on the left, you can see this is actually the electrical technical box that we need to place somehow, and usually it's the thing we try to hide. But here we thought, okay, let's take this as an opportunity. So we always pair it with a piece of mirror, and it's a bit different in each of the apartment, and it becomes almost like an art piece within each of the apartments. Well, an art piece imposed by the architects. But and here in the floors we use two tones of wood, which is also something we started doing in another project a few years earlier because we wanted to use the darker one. It was too expensive, and so we sort of found this compromise where we use two colors and it became a pattern, and it's something we've been doing in a few projects. Here a few other moments around the staircase. Where it's not moving anymore. Oh, okay. Well, this is again the space under the staircase in the lower level with that mirror before it was placed on the wall, but that's just a beautiful picture. And we also use mirror on the outside here to, let's say, emphasize this feeling of the wallpaper quality of the facade by diminishing the construction thickness or its visibility on the sides of the building. So the glass and the mirror sort of start to be less difficult to distinguish from each other. And here a few moments. Here you can see how the volume aligns with the neighbor. I mean, within such a project, of course, it might seem like a very frivolous thing, but it's also quite important to us that it, let's say, fits within a context without diminishing its neighbors in a way. This is how it is in the landscape, and in a way, there are many in the older buildings of the city, things that have the same kind of joy, we believe, but usually in more recent construction, this is a bit lacking, we think, and so we try to revive it through oblique means. And one last project I will show, which is also housing. Here, it's in an area of Porto that is a bit particular in the sense that it's made of factories. You can see these big things on the foreground. I mean, there's also the rails in front. And behind, you can see housing. So it's a bit in between the two. And our client bought the ruin, it was the first image, a ruin of a factory, which was this white rectangle, which is in between two other factories. And on the other side of the street, just facing it, you have housing. But the particular condition meant that the maximum volume we could build was the full volume of that former factory, but the maximum square meter area we could build was much less than, let's say, normal floors dividing that volume. And because of that, we thought, okay, will we take this as an opportunity to put the apartments the client wanted, which was as many as possible. That's a quotation. So basically small ones, studios. Also because there's a new station next door, so the idea is that more and more commuters will want to live here. But we took the opportunity of the excess of volume to propose to make all these apartments different from each other. So you have some that are on the top level, most of them are on the ground floor, and then you have many exceptions in plans, but also in section. These are just a few of the different sections. You can see that here, some have access to a roof terrace. Here there's another roof terrace. Some are 7 meters tall. Some have a flying column simply because why not? And here you have more normal ceiling heights, 2 on top of each other, etc. And here on the inside, it might look in the end a bit like that with a bit of imagination. This is on site a few months ago now. The foundations, here you can see the housing block, the factory, our neighbor. And this is just a few days ago. The whole thing starts to feel like a gigantic ruin, but that's usually a good sign. And here I don't know how much you can see of these, but that's a bit the kind of chaos that it suggests. But from each apartment, you would, of course, not feel that. And you can also see here some of these skylights that bring light and we hope some air to the bathrooms, which are in the back in some of these apartments. And here the hall, so this gigantic machine that made of exceptions within a box, basically. And here, for example, this is one of the dens, which is a rooftop terrace for an apartment there. And here there's another one. So the whole volume, the chaos again, the let's say what is bitten within the maximum volume. And so the expression of the whole building plays with the tension between housing or factory. It tries to be a bit of both, and of course, none of them in the end here within context. And at the very end of the building, you have this thing that we call a cat, which looks at the train station, at the train tracks, at the highway. And because we thought that it's quite important that such a monster is also cute on some level, let's say, approachable. Actually, Suto de Moura once said of Caesar buildings that they are like cats under the sun. I mean, they're also maybe, let's say, I think it's also quite different on some level, but we thought that this idea of cuteness is important because it's also what makes such a building approachable, what makes you want to care about it on some level, perhaps. And this is the kind of view you would have from the rooftop terrace, so framed a bit by the cat's ears. And here within the, let's say, the monsters that are around us.
Hello. When we were trying to address the 4 topics for tonight's presentation, there was a last topic that was kind of difficult to name, and many words were on the table, and we decided to take it as the collective. It could be the collection, it could be the relationship with the public, it could be what's next. But for us, the collective has been many things in the last few years, but mostly this kind of tension in private commissions on the distinction between what is my house, what is someone else's house, the need for independence. Like in Porto, or in Portugal, I would say, most people would prefer to have a slightly less good house, but that does not align perfectly with the neighbor. And we have been trying to tangle that idea with the possibility of a single architecture defining a group of individual houses altogether, sometimes with more success than others. But also in the last few years, the office has been faced with projects, normally of small scale, of little relevance, one could say, but of public nature, exhibition design, stage design, public spaces. So projects that deal with topics that until now were alien to us, that were very far, that felt distant, that felt incompatible. And by dealing with these projects and dealing with different natures of how these spaces are thought, how they are structured, what they are trying to achieve, we think that we might, or might not, we don't know, let's see, have achieved a different understanding of the work we were doing before. And I'm going to present 2 projects, both of them under construction, or one finishing construction, the other one starting, and that both try to deal with an idea of the collective. The first one is probably the most peculiar commission we had in our office until today. Hippie community bought a piece of land close to Lisbon, 1 hour north, in Sobral de Montegras. They wrote their own constitution, and they needed to build their own buildings to, create the conditions in which they wanted to inhabit. It took us a long time to understand exactly what they want. For about 1 year, we were designing folies, we were designing pieces that we were convinced were never going to take us nowhere. Until one day, one of these clients showed up with a very clear constitution, literally, not in abstract terms, and with a very clear program. And he said, I need a private house, I need a collective piece of housing, and I need a communal building where we can have our communal activities together. And by doing a very good program, and by good program, I mean a very clearly defined, a very intelligently structured one, we were able to understand that indeed he needed 3 buildings, and these 3 buildings, they had to coexist, but they had to be detached enough to be independently used when necessary. They have 3 sizes, as I said: private house, collective housing, and communal building. each of them had a very clear separation between what we could call the main program and the secondary program. So this very clear idea of what is, let's say, the core of such a program and what is secondary to it. And when discussing this with the clients, we understood that there was an almost romantic idea for Baroqueness, for a certain opposition between what we could call a void and what we could call the density of private programs. But our Baroque understanding lands mostly between 1960s, 70s, 80s architecture. And so we try to maybe find the solution for this project in a very diagrammatic way. As you notice also from Lara's presentation, this idea of a system, of a mathematical equation that starts defining its own rules and helps us to guide the project is very important to us. And we found in 1976, specifically 3 houses by 3 architects that we appreciate very much, that were all designed and pretty much presented to the world at the same time, the exact answer we needed to solve the plans. And we took from them, you cannot see very well, there's some yellow lines. So we took just, like we call this the cookie cutter retreat. So we just took the parts that we needed to, and with that solved the program. So a house, collective housing building, and what they call the yoga center or the dancing center on the right. And you can see that the rules become clear at some point, not just in the module that somehow helps to explain how they grow from one to each other. The first one has 0 columns, the second one 1 column, the third one 2 columns. You can imagine if there was a 4th one, it would have 3 columns. There's also the matter of the direction of the diagonal. There's one that opens, one that closes, one that it's parallel. So at some point, this becomes less of an architecture plan and more of a game. Like it's as if we are creating rules to design a drawing and less walls to design spaces. And the section on the 3 buildings is exactly the same. This was also very important to them, that the buildings would be integrated on site. And we felt that such an abstract exercise probably would benefit from the contrast and the collision with this site, and merging it by actually syncing it at the end of construction. And this brought us to other references, like this idea of the seasons, because they plant their own food, they raise their own chickens, there's a whole, that they will do everything on the site. So this idea that the seasons also become the facade of the building brings us to, dated architecture, but an architecture that we still appreciate. And these 3 buildings, they became this kind of very modern slit in the landscape with this tiny frieze that detaches them in a way, but the landscape that at the same time avoids that they fly away. And then with a little bit of let's say, integration in the landscape, and with a bit of landscape design, they will, I hope, we hope, become part of this community as the necessary backdrop for their daily activities. And on the inside, as I said, the duality is between something we cannot even photograph in the end. I mean, it's built now, and we try to document these spaces in the same perspectives as the other architects that we took the plans from did. It's not possible. So it's something that exists only on a almost rhetorical level, as Ahmed was saying, as a choreography. It's something that we can tell but cannot show. And the living spaces, so the main spaces, the big rooms on each of these are the exact opposite. So they are very clear. They are very evident. They are the raison d'être for the users to use them. And you can see that the symmetrical palette, again, the rules, the same white wall does a circle, the black wall does diagonal, the ceiling remains just varnished. So somehow you can really read also on site how the behaviors proposed will collect. And it's a collection, so it's like a series. As I said, it had 3 buildings. It could have 5, 6, 7. Who knows? The rules would apply the same way. We just have to be flexible enough to understand. Okay, they could multiply into a few more units, and these are the 3 elevations. And these are some photos of the construction site over the last few months. It's one of those projects where in the end, for the landscape to remain exactly the same, everything has to change. So you dig a lot, you move a lot of earth, and then you can see the earth there on the right side of the biggest building. And then in the end, it's going to have to come back to hide them. It's also interesting to see how, ironically, you end up designing a drawing, but the drawing becomes the structure that will hold the building that you are actually proposing. So the curve and the diagonal that create this first separation, this very abstract separation, become the actual concrete structure that will sustain the building. This is not one of those buildings where our columns hold nothing. In this case, the walls hold the actual building. And it's also funny to see how it's such down to earth. It's concrete walls, insulation, waterproofing, and some terrazzo tiles. It's a very cheap construction. Ironically, it's very violent, but at the same time very brutal. And in Portugal, construction tends to be a bit like that. The brutal, the more violent the work, the cheaper it gets, which is kind of nonsensical, but it is what it is. And here you have the photos of the three of them before earth comes in. Actually, earth started being put on top of the buildings today, but they had to stop because it's raining like hell in Porto and it's amazing weather in Zurich. And this is how we hope in a few months this relationship with the landscape, because we are really at the top of the hill, will cause this kind of interaction where you're having your yoga class inside this kind of semicircular space cut with a diagonal, and you're looking at the sunset over the mountains. And this is how the three of them will be displayed on site. And the last project I'm going to show is not a project. It's more like a rampage. It's a kind of obsession for the last few years. We never did anything public. We did a couple of exhibition designs. We did some stage design, but it's not like if we had built something for the public to inhabit, to use, and more important, something to last. And a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, roughly, the Portuguese government decided to invest a lot of money in public housing. They didn't plan it properly. They come up with this kind of very beautiful sentences, but without an actual plan, without a proper study. But they offered an opportunity, and in 1.5 years, roughly, there were more competitions than in the previous 30 years. So we had no social, public, affordable, cooperative housing for many, many years. And out of nowhere, with an institute, the Institute of Housing, that has no capacity to judge and rule and regulate these projects, we had dozens, hundreds of apartments, thousands, 32,000. And these projects that I recall our previous prime minister said are not abstract houses, they are real houses. They are judged in a very abstract manner with numbers and with criteria that are very difficult to understand. But in a country that has no culture of architecture competitions, Portugal, but with a practice that fetishizes the idea that one day we could win a competition, we decided to tackle this very seriously and very thoroughly. And so we started studying what these competitions were actually bringing, and there was a prototype of the project to win. So you take this plan that is from 2 years ago, but could be from 1960s public housing in Portugal. You take specifically this module. So bedrooms in the back, living spaces in the front, very segregated. They celebrate segregation, it's very important. You take an interior render from Mateus, and you get the Nordic furniture, all of that. You remove any hint of architectural expression or language. You make it as generic and washed down as possible. It's very important that it has no architectural expression, fundamental. And then you ask yourself, what the hell are we doing? I mean, if we're going to do this, we should do it critically. We should find a way to tackle it. And so our references go from many places, but this quote from Jean Nouvel that is written in 1987 when I was born. So at the time where he said that kind of thing already did not make sense, kind of motivated us a lot. And both within our practice and within our teaching, we try to study the matter and we try to understand what we're going to do. And there were two moments. There was a first moment that I'm going to call the moment of innocence, when we are truly naive and we think that, we need a network of regularity to fight, like Don Quixote. We need a windmill. We need to defeat them. And we try to, not being very radical because we know where we are playing, but to test something else, to flirt just a little bit with the traditional Portuguese apartment, but bringing it, cross ventilation, some sort of idea of double orientation, even to give hints, very tiny hints of an architectural expression. And out of 10 competitions, I think the best we got was like 19th place or something like that. So it was an absolute disaster. It was a full year of investment and many, many hours thrown to the trash. So there was a second moment. And on the second moment, we decided that maybe we should join forces with friends, and we collaborated with Experimental, and we decided, what if we go cynical? What if we give them exactly what they want? What if we give them, these are 4 plans from 4 different projects, but it's always the same plan, because that's exactly what we have to do. These are renders from different projects, but it's always the same render and the same furniture, fundamental to use this very high-class furniture for social housing. You always bring this kind of promoter bullshit from the server's facade, and then you treat them as Trojan horses. And so what we decided to do was, the competition takes just a couple of months, the jury takes just a couple of hours, but the project itself is going to take a few years. So what if we try to bring the project not as a finished product, but as a Trojan horse that can be deployed over the next few years? And what if through that we manage to bring the qualities that if we bring now, we know will not grant us any success? And out of 7, we won 3. It was fantastic. So It took us 10 years to win our first competition. It took us 15 days, so 2 weeks to win the second and 1 month more to win the third. So it became very clear that if we kept growing in this direction, we would probably win a few more, but we decided to stop and to now to understand to what extent are we going to be able or not to apply the proto theory that we thought we were going to do. And by designing these projects as a series also, not in front of all the public entities, but on the background, you know, like in the back, in the protection of our office, and in these discussions with our friends, we understood that maybe what we want to do is not that difficult to, you know, to package and to frame and to present in that way. So that's what we have been doing. We have been hiding in plain sight until now, and we are about to start the construction. So no one noticed yet, and this indifference is probably one of the best things we found in the process. And so to finish, I'm going to present just one of them because they have very systematic. Presenting one could be presenting the others. And this is in Almada. Almada is the city right south of Lisbon. It's a big suburb, and everything you see here is this endless sea of social, public, you know, relatively decrepit housing. It's a bit of a ghetto in a sense because these competitions, when I say they are not properly planned, they don't even address the social matters of the site. It's just the city has a piece of land here. The master plan allows you to build X square meters, so just build as much housing as you can. And in this case, we are building 25,000 square meters of social housing, 150 apartments, a lot of parking, some shops, some communal uses. And you can see that it's a site that stays exactly at the limit of this kind of social neighborhood, endless field. It's connected with a highway, it's connected with the river, it's connected with a train line, and it's at the end of a cliff, so it's facing south with a beautiful, beautiful view towards Setúbal, towards the Tagus River. And the master plan is given, so when I say these competitions are not interesting, they are really not interesting at all. I mean, they give you the footprint, the amount of elevators they want, they give you all of that, and to win you have to do it. So in this case, we decided to understand that that's not what we're gonna find interesting in our project. And what we decided to understand was how can we make it more and more efficient. So if we get some money from the efficiency, in this case, we had to have 3 levels of parking, and we managed to have 2 levels above ground for parking. We could save some money that then we can spend on things that truly matter. And this is the section. You understand that there's a slope, and there's 2 levels that have park and public programs, and then above the housing that repeats exactly the same way. The 3 volumes are exactly the same door does all the doors, the same window does all the windows. So there's an economy of means and a certain economy of quantity that are important. We won the competition with a completely different plan. So this is not the plan that won the competition, and I seriously hope that the Institute of Housing is not listening right now. But the plan is very systematic. It has to be right-left, so this is not optional. You cannot discuss this. It has to be this. It has to have 2 elevators. It has to have a few of those things, but it cannot have crossed ventilation. It cannot have a bedroom on each side, but it does. And that's what we tried to do was with very slow, in a very slow process, 1 day at a time, 1 meeting at a time, bring 1 quality at a time, and placing the 3-bedroom apartments on the ends, the 2-bedroom apartment in the middle. And you understand it's a kind of mirrored effect. So with 1 module, we end up designing the whole building. This module is a module that has no circulation space in the classical sense. It's not, I mean, coming to Zurich to talk about housing typology is a bit of a very stupid play on our side, but it's like where we come from. This is truly outrageous. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it's really, really, really the opposite of everything that is going to be built in the 32,000 houses. And by making this kind of delimitation of the hall disappear and making the hall a space that is actually part of the kitchen and the dining, maybe it has a table, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's used, maybe it's just a very generous entrance hall. We offer the possibility that whoever is in the kitchen or whoever is in the living room, they are in relation, and there's more square meters for the families to use, because these are apartments where the bedrooms are 10 square meters and the total apartment is 62 square meters. So they are very, very tiny, so every square meter counts. And of course, as I said, it's unavoidable that the references are evident. They're not even hiding in plain sight. They are just there shouting. But this idea of a communal space that goes through in Portugal to us, we believe it's a very important thing to bring to the discussion. And this idea that you see from the front to the back and from the back to the front, and once life comes in, whatever happens in the middle becomes this kind of added value, this kind of generosity of the proposal. Same thing with the bedrooms. The bedrooms have slightly wider doors than is normal, not just for handicap accessibility, but also to provide a much franker, much more open relation between private and public. That when the house is empty, it's just a set of opportunities. We don't believe that opportunities arise because, you know, stuff moves around, but because you leave a set of hints that allow whoever inhabits to follow or not. And if we add up everything we ever built in our office in square meters, in area, it means roughly half of one of these buildings. So these buildings to us are, this project specifically, it's 6 times bigger than everything we ever achieved. And it's a building or a project that deals with many topics. It deals with economy because everything has to be catalog found. It has to be, you cannot personalize. You can choose colors, but you cannot really go much further than that. It has one window, one door, one handrail detail, one drain pipe, one whatever. It's a project that deals with elements, as Lara presented also, that, each piece has to have a value of its own and be able to survive and to withstand the narrative of the project almost alone. And it's also choreography in the sense that very literally it's, kind of hiding in plain sight of the public entity that is commissioning it. But at the same time, it thinks, or at least it's naive enough to go back to the beginning, to believe that it can generate some sort of collective life and collective qualities that will not be found so easily or so often in this wave of public housing that is going to be built in Portugal. So we hope that in a few years we can ideally prove that we were right, maybe discovered we were wrong, but thank you so much for having us tonight. Okay.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. It's been a real treat to follow you and to see the many aspects that you're dealing with. On the program, we thought we're going to do a round table, but it will look kind of these flags and us standing here, a little bit military. So perhaps we just do a round table, including the entire space, which is already a half circle, which is something that Robert Mangold liked and you like. So this would make sense, if you agree. Now we have this wonderful device here. I think those who designed it called it participatory. I would say it's passive-aggressive. It allows to interact with the audience by throwing the microphone into the room. The Consul General would like to have the first question.
Thank you very much. My first question would be very simple. First of all, very Mondrianesque, the way you present your work. I enjoy it a lot. So congratulations for that. When you're thinking about the space, of course, these elements are always there. How far do you go in terms of function? Is function a priority as well? Or you focus mainly on these 4 elements and then function comes after? The next.
I think that. Can you hear? Can you hear now?
You can do the opposite.
Can you hear now? Oh. I think to a certain extent, function is not different from plumbing or solar panels or anything else. It's part of the project. It's something that we care about, that we solve, that we make sure that works perfectly. Not something that we celebrate tremendously. It's not like the thing that starts our conversations. But in some of the projects we show today, I think it's very evident. For example, I think in this last project, the need to solve a very pragmatic problem is almost the engine of the whole project. In other projects, it's solved, it's taken to the side, and then something else can become, can go under the spotlight. But I would argue that in all of them, to a certain extent, it's there, it's taken care of. It's, I think, you agree? Okay, you agree.
No, but I think one of the topics that Philip talked about was also the fact that these spaces can actually be anything. And that's that kind of freedom that both allow us also to then focus on other topics, but also allows the users to do whatever they want with it. And it also allows us to say that maybe we don't really care how people live in it. Each person will use it in a different way. So it gives us both freedom in terms of for the user and also for ourselves. Now I throw.
Yeah.
I throw. I'm not sure if I.
Hi, thank you for a beautiful presentation. Out of the hundreds of things that I could ask, I'm gonna ask about one, the Trojan horse. It's brilliant. It's hilarious and both depressing as well, that this is the way that you can actually get through. I'm wondering what happens after you got the Trojan horse in there and you storm out. So did you find procedurally, did you find resistance or did you have leeway to work? Was there a big oversight or did you take advantage of the fact that there was no oversight? So what happened next so you could actually do what you were planning from the start?
I can use this. Just we didn't storm out. We sneaked in. So Philip was saying like one thing at a time. Everything, all the things that we propose are very rational, very efficient. So all the topics that we raised, of course, they approved because they had a lot of logic behind. We knew the end game. Maybe they didn't, but they approved everything. And everything made sense. And we are really convinced that it actually creates a better project. It's not just to do a weird thing for doing a weird thing. So even though it's going through the drops of rain and getting things approved without them fully realizing about the whole thing, we actually believe it will create something better for or a different thing for the 3,000 apartments. So out of these 3,000, 32,000, these 150 apartments, I don't think it will make a big difference for them, but for us it will.
When we talk about them, it kind of villainizes the Institute of Housing and it makes it very abstract. But the Institute of Housing is very short-staffed. When we talk about the Institute of Housing, you would imagine like, hundreds of people. It's 14 people. These people, they are not, in many cases, even architects or engineers. They are just people that never had to deal with this kind of pressure. They never did a competition for 30 years, and then out of nowhere, they have to deal with 32,000 of new apartments. I think they are well-intended, but very often it's difficult to explain to them what they are not able to understand. It's a little bit like the Ford thing. Like if you ask what people wanted in the beginning of the last century, they would say a faster horse, not a car. And in many of the discussions, that's the feeling. So as we said, we want 3 projects, and in the first one, that is not the one I showed in the first meeting because we were naive at the time. We just went with an open heart and we said, this is what we want to propose. We believe that this is good, this is better, it was an absolute catastrophe. And on the second meeting, we brought a diluted version of that, and it was a catastrophe. And on the third meeting, we brought what we want to bring, and we said, and this is what you asked for, and the thing started moving. So we understood that it's not really about the object per se, it's about the idea, the projection that object causes. So if we believe, and it's a big gamble because we are putting ourselves in the position of pretty much pre-approving something that might fail tremendously, as I said. But if we don't take the gamble and no one else is doing that, I think it's also a lost opportunity in a sense.
Maybe I would also add that the idea of the Trojan horse is also not something that only showed up at the big collective housing, but I think almost every project in our office is a Trojan horse in one way or another, because the same kind of strategy applied to submitting the project, any kind of single family house, to the municipality and kind of disguising the, I don't know, stripes of black and white marble on the facade in order not to raise too many questions, or even giving a simple example of one of our projects where the main facade is actually the back facade. So it's also almost kind of a physical Trojan horse where the main event of the project is actually not visible at the street, but is hiding somewhere at the back.
So just that you can calibrate your attention, we'll have one more question if the dice go somewhere. But there's going to be an apéro right afterwards. I have a quick question. A quick question. Excellent. So there's going to be one more question, and then we're going to make a wrap up. No?
thank you. It was a wonderful lecture, and you showed the seriousness of your work. And you were quite defensive about not being frivolous and things like that, Ahmed, in the kind of Swiss context, which is unnecessary. However, I still have the feeling that you are working with a different pace. You're not only talking with a different speed, Felipe, but also I think, you know, living in Switzerland, working here, I think we are so much slower than what you can do in Portugal. And I think the work benefits from that speed. But I'm curious how you perceive that and what you would say about that.
So let's say the speed was a survival strategy, at least in the start. Like we started with very, let's say, imperfect commissions and almost all of our projects were done for people that had zero interest in our ideas or our intentions. They were done for people that's simply somebody told them that we were cheap and efficient. And so they would get to us because of that, and therefore we had to be cheap and efficient. And these projects paid so low that we needed, I don't know, 2 or 3 a month almost. And of course, not all of those get built. I think there is no project that we built that we never showed. And so it also means that with these clients that had zero desire for our expertise, we had to find a space for a project. And so this also means agility and speed, I think, because it means that when you propose something and there is zero interest, you need the next week to have something else to show that you also find interest in. So I think that it has been really a way of working. And also, maybe I should stress that we thrive to do that without ever working at night or in the weekends and so on. So it has been, yeah, we need to draw fast and to think fast and I think, but also we need, I think maybe this is more of a duty for ourselves. I think we want and we feel the need for it to be intelligible. This is why it might have sounded defensive on some level, but it's not. We want it to make sense, but to seem extremely frivolous and stupid almost, you know. But I think it's when reason brings you to a place where you could have never predicted from the start that we find it fascinating in a way. And so yeah, that's why yeah. And the difference to Switzerland, I mean, is quite obvious, I think. But I think also we were extremely lucky in a way to arrive in Portugal at the right moment, but we had no idea that we were to start the office, let's say. And there has been a surge in things to do, and at the same time, most of our generation of architects were gone. They were here, they were in the UK, they were in Norway, and for good reasons. But because of that, also, let's say we had a bit more of a bit more open playground in a way, and yeah, well, that's it. But of course, there is something in. Perhaps there is a possibility for a certain kind of lightness or a certain, let's say, I find, at least on a personal level, I find Portuguese architecture to have a certain lightheartedness that sometimes I lacked when I was here, and I think this is something we enjoy playing with. But we all, at least, well, Philippe and Anna worked in Switzerland as well, so I'm not. I think we all feel like that.
Oh, the online audience. Okay, we'll take one more.
One more online. Oh, I can barely read this. When I look at the appearance or spatial composition of your house, I think of Kazuo Shinohara's housing works. However, the elements inside the space give off a truly postmodern feeling, as stated in Art of Loving, an article in A+U. Your work seems to have the character of satirizing and criticizing reality through the elements I mentioned earlier. Is there a reason why you include such a critical and cynical content in a building? I'm not reading it again.
But I don't know. I thought Shinohara was a postmodernist, but but well, no, but yeah, why not? In a way, I don't think it's cynicism, or at least it's never cynicism without a certain kind of innocence as well. I think they both. And when we talk about I think when we wrote that we were a naive architecture office, it's maybe that we wanted the architecture to be naive on some level rather than the office. And maybe there is a desire at least to provoke or disturb certain recipes, but maybe that can sound like cynicism on some level, but I'm not sure I fully understood the full question though. Oh.
Maybe I'll just add that it depends on which, of course, some of the houses of Shinohara that we showed are from a period that had no color, but he used color in his projects. But I think our projects, what we always try to do is that we don't just look into one reference. We actually try to merge things and to create other things. And honestly, I truly believe that even maybe looking now from some buildings built during the modernist period might feel a bit quirky, but they were clearly having fun. So we would also like to bring back a bit of this joy that they had to architecture in general, and not everything has to be white and pure and clean and simplistic.
If I can just add one sentence on Shinohara, I think there was in Shinohara the idea that an architecture piece could be a critique of society. I think we believe that's partially true, but that you cannot do that by thinking of it without it being engulfed within, let's say, a whole network of meanings, and therefore we also have some distance to that position, I think.
I mean, to wrap up, first of all, I'd just like to thank you for absolutely fabulous presentation. And just really to say, I think it strikes me that whether it be the Trojan horse, smoke and mirrors, cloaks and daggers, you seem to have an enormous amount. I mean, I think you could throw Russian dolls in there. You found an enormous number of techniques and methods within which to roll in the kind of playfulness, the joy of it, with a kind of profound seriousness, but somehow to allow them to move around one another, so that even in the most kind of technically rigorous, functionally rigorous things, you still manage to speak and let the project speak, let the spaces speak. And to some extent, whether they cross over Shinohara's kind of transition into postmodernism, to some extent, your language is yours. I think those in architecture can enjoy the references, can connect up the dots, sometimes literally. But I think that there is something, I think that in this kind of ability to disguise motives and traces, you end up opening up the space to other possibilities. And I think somehow from the smallest project to these much larger ones, which really can't wait to see actually executed, I think that there is a profound joy, pleasure, beauty in architecture, and that's really very refreshing. So I'd like to thank you for that. I'd like to thank the Consul for supporting us, the School of Architecture for being present, Željko for kind of connecting up all the different amazing people that make this evening possible, and thank you all for coming, and hopefully you'll join us for an apéro outside to carry on this chat. But thank you, Atelier Fala. Thank you very much.
Really wrap up. Also to thank Professor Tom Emerson, Professor Philip Ursprung, Željko, and Taribo in this in helping us getting this together. I don't know if we've noticed, but this initiative just started with the idea of bringing together Portugal and Switzerland. We brought together Portugal, Switzerland, Germany, Argentina, Austria, Spain, France, Italy, Japan, Liechtenstein, UK. So we will continue to do this because there is an interest on these kinds of topics and on these kinds of conferences. Last but not least, we need to give a big thank to our partners here. And Panorama was a big sponsor of ours. They made this happen. They brought us all the architects here to Zurich. So a round of applause to them as well. Our second partner, you're going to taste it outside. I hope you enjoy it. It's the Pacheco wine. So I hope you like it and enjoy the apero after this conference. Thank you very much for coming.